Hello everyone and welcome. It's Q&A time. That's really it. I'm just going to jump right into the questions. This first one is a multi-part one from Connor. Shout out to you, my good chum. Always enjoy talking to you. Which games have you not played as of yet but would love to play someday? That is a very interesting question because there's a lot of... the short version is there's a lot of games that I would love to play. Excluding my entire backlog of stuff spanning all the systems that I own, there's just a lot of, there are, multiple games from the past couple of years and even, several years that I would love to get around to playing that I just haven't had the time to pick up yet or just get around to because I not only have my backlog, but I just am busy with so much other stuff. It's just, I don't even know where I would start with that. Other than just saying it's yes, I do have a lot. I just do not know when I will get around to them. Maybe once I get through my backlog, maybe if I, get around to picking up a copy of this or this here or there. I wouldn't even know how to, list all, I'd probably have to spend a good couple hours just making an entire list of all the different games that I've missed out on, but I would still love to dive into, so it's a lot. That's the long way of saying, yeah, it's a lot of games. Alright, the next one from this multi-parter is, what are your favorite episodes from Goosebumps? Alright, this is another interesting question that I don't think I have a definitive answer for because I don't really think I have a be-all, end-all episode that I love above the rest because much like the books, I collectively enjoy all of those for what they are, and it's just these very, light horror books for kids. And, same thing with the TV show where it's just there are, much like the books, there are some that are better than others, but I can't really say that I have one that I enjoy above the rest. It's to the credit of the books, it's those are, books and involve a lot of the use of imagination, and to the TV show, it's okay, you're getting this visual representation of the material. And I do really do love and appreciate how they were able to take take all of those books and for the most part condense them into these, into these short TV length episodes, or some of them being multi-parters. But I think I just kind of enjoy them, for what they are, and it's just much like how the books are light horror for kids. It's this is light horror, but it's got this nice campy cheesiness to it that I find especially appealing. Maybe this is just because growing up, I can imagine I can imagine for a young kid they might find that stuff terrifying, but for me, I always just found it interesting, especially because I was kind of into the horror genre when I was younger, and still am today. But the beauty of that show is it's just this kind of fine thing that just gets better with age because of how dated it is. It's this is some early mid 90s cheese, and it is just so good that it just gets better. It just keeps on getting better with age, and I just cannot find it within myself to pick one episode out of that entire show's run that I like above the rest. They're all fun, weird, and just wacky in their own special way, much like the books that every episode is based off of. And yeah, it's just that's just how I feel about it. Next one is, in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, what is your favorite kart combination? This is another good one because it's been a long time since I played the game. Well, first of all, I always play as Donkey Kong. I mean, prior to the inclusion of Inkling and Link, I always played it. I just, for some fucking reason, always just played as Donkey Kong, and that's just how it stayed, even, after Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out, and you did have those extra characters who I'd, play it every now and again. But as far as my kart combination would go, I always picked the motorbike, the dirt bike, with, I always picked the dirt bike with, I think the super slit. I don't know. I can't remember what tires that I used. I think it was the super I think it was probably the same kind that go with that that goes with that frame, and then I always just kind of used the standard glider because I going through all the different designs. There's some that look really wacky and zany, but I just like to keep it very basic. So that's just I always play as DK. Always pick the standard bike setup and use the standard glider. Call me basic, but that's just how I play. Next up to bat, is there anything in life that's cuter than a Yoshi? The child. Don't even try to fight me. He's cute, he's green, and wherever I go, he goes. And I doubt there's ever going to be another character that comes along to change that for me. So yeah. Last in the multi-parter, what's the next cutest thing, Kirby or Spider-Ham? I'm gonna say Kirby. I think Spider-Ham is funny, but I don't think he's cute. Like, I just think he's a very humorous character, but Kirby is freaking adorable. I mean, look at that little pink fella. It's like he's adorable, he's badass, and apparently is a baby that's capable of just consuming anything. It's like, what's not to love or find it that adorable? It's like it's freaking Kirby. It's like what? It's like, how is that even a question? How is this even like an argument? I mean, if it was like, Kirby versus the child, then obviously I'm gonna pick the child because it's like it's Grogu, it's the child, so obviously I'm gonna pick him. But second place still goes to can go to Kirby. So, and that is all for questions. Yeah, only got one multi-parter, but it was a darn good one. Again, shout out to Connor. Good job. Thank you for that. But I could be a little bit of a cynic and just cut things short right here, but I'm not gonna do that. Part of why I wanted to do this was do something a little bit more fun and different and create something for you guys to get to know me just a little bit better by. So now that, the questions are out of the way, I decided to do something a little bit extra, and I jotted up a list of a few things to get to know me, to get to know me, and I'm just gonna read that sucker off right now. So, first up, I'm a huge nerd. I know that's not really a freaking surprise, but I feel like I should just, say that first and foremost anyway. It's like, yeah, I'm a huge freaking nerd of all types of things. Usually when I, describe my interest to others, I always just kind of go down the same basic list. It's like, I love movies, games, comics, more conventional novels, collectibles, and basically just a lot of things, typically, just fandom. I come from a family that is just filled with enthusiasts for all those different things, and those, interests that in turn became mine, and it's a huge part of who I am, and a huge part of the things that I've done in my life over the years, from the type of media that I've immersed myself in to the types of, merchandise and items that I've collected from over the years. This room alone is just wall to wall in artwork and collectibles from all types of my favorite media. This shelf right next to me, practically top to bottom, is filled with some of my favorite figures of some of my favorite characters from some of my favorite media of all time, and vice versa. And it's just a huge part of my life, from from all of that stuff to even just my own personal expression, from the types of clothes that I wear to kind of how I choose to present and style my own hair, to even getting as of this year my first tattoo from from my favorite female video game character Ellie from The Last of Us. It's like it's just such a huge part of my life, and I'm just such an enthusiast for all these different characters, all these different worlds and stories, spanning all of this, spanning movies, games, books, etc. It's just like spanning all these different things. It has just been a huge part of my life and will continue to be so moving forward. But I thought I would just kind of kick that off by just going a little bit more in depth of my interest as a fellow nerd. All right, second is I am an aspiring filmmaker. I believe I've talked about it maybe here and there in passing in the past, but usually whenever I'm not talking about video games, even though that's what I seem to mostly talk about, I love movies. I basically came out of the womb watching films. Growing up, my mother and even some of my other family members have shown me all types of cool different films here and there over the years, and it just slowly blossomed into this immense passion for the craft, for the media, and just the production process and all the different aspects that go into creating a film, not just, from writing all the way to the final days of post-production to you getting that final, that finished product. It is a huge thing that I'm into, and it is something that I've aspired and strived to get into ever since I was a kid. From making my own crappy home, shorts at home, to, learning some basic, skills, to, getting the necessary resources and materials, and honing my abilities over the years to going from someone just kind of going it from a very amateur perspective to someone with a little bit more intermediate amateur experience, I guess, because it's like I wouldn't say that I'm would call myself a professional filmmaker, even though it's like I've just a lot of the stuff that I feel like I've gained a lot of experience over the years working on my own projects or helping out people with theirs, to just kind of learning more, tricks and ways of going about making different aspects of it. And I really want to, someday, write and direct my own feature films, which is something that I'm already working on with my best friend Kyle. We are working on multiple different projects together, like a huge list of stuff. But right now we're currently working on our second project, on our first feature film, and I'm super stoked to be a part of that. And I really cannot wait for cameras to start rolling on that, and for me to do to have my part in that, to help get that, make that thing a reality, and all the different stories that we want to work together, that that we want to tell in the future. But yeah, film is a big part of my life. I could talk all day about it. I really could. Don't even get me started. Third is I am a socially awkward introvert. This may not be, again, huge bit of a shocker. I might have mentioned this in passing before, but on top of coming from a family that is very nerdy and has all these different interested in all this different media, they also happen to be social introverts, like I in turn became. Yeah, I do have my friends, including my best friend Kyle, who I mentioned before. Again, shout out to you, bud. You're the greatest friend in the world, and I love you. But yeah, I do have my friends that I converse with and see from time to time, especially when the circumstances are more ideal given what's going on in the world. But I typically spend a lot of my time just in isolation, just kind of alone, just keeping to myself, and just doing stuff either in this space or elsewhere. Just I like my. I do like my sense of isolation and loneliness, as depressing as that might sound. But that's just kind of how I am to a T. It's like and I also just never really did great in social situations. I've never really been, never really went to parties. I never really went to big social functions. I always just kind of did the same thing that I've always done since I was a kid, and that's pretty much just spend a lot of time just by myself, either mostly at home playing games or watching films or doing a number of other different things pertaining to my interests, or even just laying back and just staring up at the ceiling, just thinking about stuff. It's just, I just spend a lot of time, by my lonesome, and I'm pretty, and, I'm, there are the times that I want to break out, want to do something different and not do that. But for the most part, I'm just a socially awkward introvert. I love my alone time, and I've never really been the most social creature in the world, but it's just who I am. Number 4 is I love the outdoors. Now, despite being like a huge nerd that loves all this different media, growing up, I did develop an appreciation and eventual love for nature and the outdoors. There's something that I just can't explain about the fascination that I have with just the beauty and blissfulness that comes from just kind of, not only looking at, but just being in that setting where, it's just nature. It's just simplistic. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just a place, an ecosystem, something where all types of living things, inhabit. And it feels like there's a peaceful harmony to all of it that I've always found very fascinating, that I've always just found very intriguing, and just loving immersing myself in every now and again. And even back when the circumstances are more ideal, I would spend a lot of my time just going through walks through nature parks, and just spending hours just on different, on trails, just thinking to myself, looking at the sights and, looking at the sights around me, listening to the sounds around me, and just really engrossing myself in this very simplistic yet beautiful setting, away from tech, away from people, a place where I can just, in a sense, be alone with my thoughts and just admire everything that I was seeing and hearing around me, and just spend a good couple of hours just in that environment. I mean, if I really could, I would just spend a week at at one of the more larger nature parks that are, probably up north here in Michigan, or in other parts of the country, or even the world, where I could just spend days or even a whole week just trekking through miles of trail without another human soul nearby, where I can just surround myself with just the beauty of the world, and just have a more, and just have just a grand old time just doing that. There's just something about the outdoors that you just can't get from the comfort of your home. You have to just go outside and just go there, and that's something that it's something that I always enjoy doing. All right, well, going back to the nerdier side of things, what exactly are some of my favorite films? Well, those include stuff like Die Hard, RoboCop, Mad Max, Evil Dead, The Terminator, Predator, and more recent stuff like John Wick. Oh my god, I fucking love John Wick. Those movies are just so damn good in their own right. I could talk about those alone all day. But I typically enjoy a little bit of everything, most genres like, comedy, drama, and everything else in between. But I mostly kind of lean towards more action and horror, especially action, because that's the kind of stuff my mother grew up with. And in turn, that's the kind of stuff that she showed me a lot of the films that she was into, growing up, especially, Die Hard, which then quickly became like my favorite action film and probably my favorite film in general. And really just kind of gave me this slow appreciation for films well before my time, and really gave me this interesting insight and perspective while watching films, growing up as a kid. And, kind of just seeing that sort of compare and contrast between the eras, but also just how much things have evolved, like how much film as a whole has evolved and maybe even devolved in some areas. And it's always, and I definitely have this, this lens where I love to go back and watch, some more old school stuff, as I listed before. But then again, you got more modern day stuff like, John Wick, more stuff from my time, my generation, you could say, that I especially love because of how, straightforward it is, but at the same time so complex it is with its world, its characters, that it feels very reminiscent of certain old school action films that kind of had that same attention to detail. But captured through a more modern, refined lens. But yeah, those are some some of my favorite films. I can talk all day about this stuff. But what about my favorite games? Well, that's probably a slightly longer list that I can immediately reference more. Well, my favorite games include Splinter Cell, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Uncharted, The Last of Us, and many, 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 many more different types of stuff. Much like movies, I do, and for the most part, enjoy a little bit of everything. I'm trying to broaden my horizons to more genres, but those are typically the kinds of titles that I enjoy, and specifically the genres that I mostly enjoy. But much like film, I preferably have a more of a preference towards interesting stories. It's like when I play a game, much like watching a film, it's like I want to get an interesting story with well written characters that that go someplace with all those elements. But but to its credit, it's got more of an immersive angle because you're actually playing through the story rather than just watching it. And though I do like more old school experience, more straightforward old school stuff, like Spyro, which was a huge fucking part of my childhood and something I still very much love today. Or, even something that's got more of an emphasis on, just the experience itself, like Pokemon or even The Legend of Zelda and stuff like that. There's something just about more narrative-driven experiences that I especially love, and yet oddly enough find myself, but at the same time I find myself leaning towards more challenging stuff like stealth and horror. I can't really explain why I lean so much towards those genres. It's just, I don't know, there's just something about the challenges that both of those things present, but in their own distinct ways, where it's like you either have to think on the fly or have a more planned, methodical approach that I guess that just offers something that I really just kind of enjoy. Maybe it's just I like the challenge of stealth, but I also like the horror and atmosphere, like the atmosphere and terror that comes with the horror game because I love horror so much. But I can't really explain it. That's just but at the end of the day, probably my favorite be-all, end-all game series of all time is still hands down Splinter Cell. It's like I just love that. I love those games. I love love the gameplay. I love the characters. I love the stories. And Sam Fisher especially is like my favorite game character of all time. I mean, for crying out loud, just last year, one of my favorite memories was getting this kick-ass replica of his of his iconic trifocal goggles. Yeah, I never get tired of that sound. But yeah, God, I could talk all day about those games, and I really love going back and re-immersing myself in all the different titles in the series, and I look forward to the day that the ladies and gents at Ubisoft finally come around to making a new title in the series, but unfortunately they're not the same company that they used to be several years ago, and all I can do is have wishful thinking, but I look forward to the day that a new title in the series gets made. Alright, and the last one, number 7, is what are some of my favorite comics? And I feel like this is kind of where things are going to be a little bit more, I feel might step into something a little bit more divisive and controversial. And that's mostly because I primarily love anti-heroes. Now, I imagine there's so many different characters spanning multiple different brands. and you have all these different types of diverse heroes and characters and such. But at the end of the day, I just love anti-heroes. I love them across film, I love them across games, and I especially love them across comics because I love grounded. I love characters that have their feet firmly planted on the ground and are immersed in the grittiness and the realness of the world of whatever setting and story that they happen to, be in. Characters like the Punisher. I mean, look at my t-shirt. The Punisher is my favorite comic book character of all time, my favorite anti-hero of all time. But, other characters like the Red Hood, Spawn, John Constantine, Hellboy, love those guys absolutely, because they each bring something different and each have their own sort of like interesting mind and mentality. But at the end of the day, they're very, with the exception of like Spawn and Hellboy, what I love about them is that they're all very human characters that have, very, sort of human problems for the most part, and kind of have to approach those in a very sort of like mundane and human way, given their different, kind of skill sets. But it's also, not just as a, character, but I also just really love them on a very psychological level, where it's like a guy like Frank Castle, it's like, yeah, you understand why, it's like, hopefully you understand why he does what he does, but what I find interesting about him is the fact that on some level, I do agree with kind of where his head's at, even though I cannot stress enough that I do believe that it's like, I only in that fictitious context do I agree with him, because you cannot apply what he does to real life like some people mistakenly assume, but that's a whole different topic within itself. But but with a character like him, I understand where his head's at, and at the same time, I on some level I do agree with him. But I find it more interesting to kind of see how he applies that type of thinking to every type of scenario that he's confronted with throughout his long history in comics. And I've definitely liked the many different writers that have kind of tackled him and handled his different stories. And it's the same thing with Jason Todd, same thing with John Constantine and Hellboy and such. It's like, I love the different kinds of ways that those type of characters would handle themselves in those kind of situations. But yeah, I mean, though I mostly lean towards anti-heroes, I definitely do like more conventional heroes like Spider-Man, Captain America, and Daredevil, who is kind of an anti-hero in his own right, but at the same time is a little bit more heroic than somebody like the Punisher. But I especially would consider Spider-Man to be probably my favorite, more conventional superhero, because he's an everyman. It's like we can relate. It's like he's a guy that we can really relate to. And growing up as a socially awkward teen who was a huge freaking nerd that had friends but not a whole lot of, and didn't really fully sync with or understand people in a more I guess common social sense. I've always felt I was a few steps behind people in terms of just the stuff that they were interested into, or just the stuff that they were doing at the time. Excluding my whole thing with identity, and soon realizing that I'm trans. Just on that very social level, I just felt with my peers in general, whether they be the boys or the girls, I just didn't feel that I really fit in with them in any way. And it was a character like Spider-Man that really kind of that I really could relate to, because it's like, oh yeah, he's just a guy with, aside from being a superhero, it's like, oh yeah, it's like he's just your everyman first, who's got his own problems and obstacles and hurdles with social life and family and friends and all of those different things. And I really stuck with me, growing up until, I got into more, of a character like the Punisher and became a little bit more edgy because of him. But that's just kind of how I grew up. But Spidey always stuck with me because of his wholesome mindset and his wholesome values and personality, and just who he is as a character. And I really love how a lot of that kind of expression has kind of manifested itself in Miles Morales more recently, who's definitely stepped into as a more prominent character in mainstream media and in general, both in movies and more recently the video game. I absolutely love the Miles Morales game, because I just really feel I can relate to this character, not only because of how he's personified and how he has his own types of hurdles and stuff like that, but I also feel it's nice for me to have that kind of representation as a person who is biracial, because I am half Irish and also half Dominican. So to have a half Hispanic character like myself is, immensely good to have that kind of representation. And Spidey always just really stuck for me. Really, just stuck with me, and still does, whether it be Peter, and now more recently, whether it be Miles, or even the entire Spider-Verse in general. Love Spider-Gwen, by the way. But at the end of the day, yeah, I love anti-heroes, and the Punisher will always be my be-all, end-all favorite comic book character, no matter what. And that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed that, getting to know me just a little bit better. Maybe down the road I can do something like this again. Who knows? I tend to take things a day at a time. But before I go, I wanted to throw another special thanks out to all of you who have been and continue to keep watching. Your wonderful support must mean I must be doing something right. But also, as of recording, my channel is currently sitting at 126 subscribers, which is 20 plus more than when I posted the Q&A announcement video, which is amazing. Thank you to all of you newcomers who have joined in. Thank you. As I said in that video, and it is my goal moving forward to continue to create honest and informative content regarding my experiences as a transgender woman with the aim to help others. Whether someone is questioning or struggling, or maybe you're a friend or a family member that wants to better that has someone in your life that you want to better understand. I hope that what I'm doing here can help any of you in some way, shape, or form, and that's what I enjoy doing, and it's what I'm going to continue to keep doing forward. So thank you to all of you who have been watching and hopefully taking away something from anything that I'm saying and or doing here. So yes, thank you. But anyway, that is all for now. Thank all of you so very much for watching, and take care.